Doug, how's my sound?
Your sound is very good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Your Honor, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. Okay, I think everyone's here. We can get started. If we could go on the record, Doug.
You're on the record, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
We are on the record in case number 9725, Chaberton Solar Pine Rock LLC's application for a certificate of public convenience and necessity to construct a 3.0 megawatt solar photovoltaic generating facility in Carroll County, Maryland. Start with appearances, starting with the applicant.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Andy Flavin with the law firm Troutman Pepper Locke LLP. Just note that the Troutman Pepper Hamilton Sanders recently merged with Locke Lord LLP, hence the change in name for the law firm, but everything else remains the same. And with me, Your Honor, we have Mike Doniger, the Chief Operating Officer for Chaberton. And I believe we also have a Tyler Richards with Chaberton, as well as a development manager for the project. And I believe we also have Charles Walker with the ARM group as well.
Mr. Reese won't be joining us.
I believe he is expected to be here, is my understanding.
Okay.
Tyler or Charles, can you confirm that?
Yeah, I just spoke with him just a couple minutes ago. He should be joining. Might just be having technical difficulties or something.
Thank you. And Your Honor, one more thing. We also have Lauren Barchi with Chaberton as well. She's on the call, and she's the community engagement manager for this project.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. PPRP? You're muted, Ms. McLemore. Or at least I can't hear you. No one can hear you. Okay, while we're waiting for Ms. McLemore, why don't we go ahead with OPC?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Isaac Lindenbaum on behalf of OPC.
Good afternoon. And staff?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Harrison Scher on behalf of the technical staff of the Maryland Public Service Commission.
Good afternoon. All right, we're going to have to give Ms. McLemore a minute to rejoin us.
Your Honor, can I just do an audio check? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I just want to make sure because we couldn't hear Sandra. Thank you.
And Your Honor, it appears that Mr. Reese just joined us from ARM Group.
Yes, I admitted him.
Thank you.
Your Honor, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what happened. Also, Mr. Cotton is trying to join and it won't let him. It's saying that he needs some kind of code or something. Is what he indicated.
I have a meeting ID. I have a passcode. What does he need?
Let me take both and then I'll go on mute and call him. That's okay.
Okay. The meeting ID is 872-8550-82
Okay.
8286.
8286.
Yes.
Okay, and the passcode
6BXC capital AT.
6BXCAT, correct?
Right, with the A being capitalized.
Okay. And I will go off. I'll be right back. I'm going to get in touch with him.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Cotton is joining us now.
Your Honor, I have a quick question. I cannot get my video to work. Is that okay? You want me to leave this meeting and join again and see if that will work?
I recognize your voice.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, at the October 23rd hearing, we left off with applicant exhibit 24. Does the applicant have any additional exhibits that it wishes to enter at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe we had the responses to the bench data requests 2 and 3. Let's see. Give me just one moment here. I can provide that information.
I was going to do those as bench exhibits. Do you have
Okay.
any other exhibits?
We did just file on January 2nd a very slightly updated conceptual site plan under mail log number 314592. And we respectfully ask for that to be marked and admitted into the record.
Okay, that would be marked as applicant exhibit 25. Does anyone have any objections to applicant exhibit 25? Hearing and seeing none, applicant exhibit 25 will be admitted into the record.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, then turning to PPRP, I believe you filed in the docket a few things after the October 23rd hearing. I had that we were up to PPRP exhibit 12.
Yes, Your Honor. I thought that okay, so exhibit 13.
Do you need to know what 12 is?
I believe I know, but let me verify. Just one sec. 12 is the attachment 3 to the supplemental direct testimony of William Cotton.
Yes.
Okay. And if I understand you correctly, Your Honor, you're going to enter the exhibit to the to bench data request number 2 as a bench exhibit, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I would request that PPRP exhibit 13 be marked be the revised sections of the project assessment report PAR for the Pine Rock Solar Project.
So marked.
And PPRP exhibit 13A, the revised project assessment report for the Pine Rock project, the redlined version.
So marked.
I believe that is all we have, Your Honor.
I don't believe that's true. I have that on October 31st, PPRP filed revised supplemental testimony, a revised PAR, including an updated glare analysis, revised recommended license conditions, and some other documents.
Okay, Your Honor, I thought they were already entered. I apologize.
I don't know how they would be if you didn't file them until October 31st.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you want to get back to me on these?
Yes, Your Honor, if you could give me a couple minutes. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, bench exhibit 1 is going to be OPC's response to the bench data request that I issued to OPC. That was on November 1st, OPC filed its response. That will be bench 1. Bench 2 will be the responses to bench data request number 2 from PPRP. Bench 3 are the responses to bench data request number 2 from Chaberton. Bench 4 will be Chaberton's responses to bench data request number 3 to staff.
Your Honor,
Yes,
I believe bench data request number 3 was directed towards staff.
correct. I don't necessarily need staff's responses in the record unless you want to enter them yourself.
No, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure.
I do want to enter Chaberton's responses. Well, actually, let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and enter staff's as well. So 1 is OPC's response, 2 is PPRP's response to BDR 1. No, BDR 2, because PPRP's response to bench data request number 1 is already in the record from the first hearing. So bench 2 is PPRP's response to BDR 2. Bench 3 is Chaberton's response to BDR 2. Bench 4 is staff's response. And 5 is Chaberton's response. Have I completely confused everyone? Are we straight? Okay. Ms. McLemore, are you back with us?
Yes, Your Honor, and I
Okay.
apologize. I've got the exhibits in front of me now. And if I could strike what I had said before, and let's just start with PPRP Exhibit 4-F4. If that's okay.
No,
Okay.
I don't have that in front of me. Can we start with PPRP 13?
Okay, PPRP 13 would be the revised recommended license conditions, the clean version.
Okay, not the revised PAR.
No, Your Honor.
You want to strike all that? Okay, we'll start over.
Yes, Your Honor, if that's
13,
okay.
13 is the revised recommended license conditions.
Yes, Your Honor.
And I suppose you have a 13A?
Yes, Your Honor. The revised recommended license conditions, the red line version.
Okay, those will be marked 13 and 13A.
And then PPRP Exhibit 14, the revised supplemental direct testimony of William Cotton.
So marked.
PPRP Exhibit 15, the attachment 1 to the revised supplemental direct testimony of William Cotton.
So marked.
PPRP 16, which is attachment 2 to the revised supplemental direct testimony of William Cotton.
So marked.
PPRP Exhibit 17 would be the attachment 3 to the revised supplemental direct testimony of William Cotton.
So marked.
And PPRP Exhibit 18, attachment 4 to the revised supplemental direct testimony of William Cotton.
So marked.
Your Honor, we also filed the enlarged figures for 4 and 5. Do you want me to go ahead and do that as well?
I don't think we need to do that.
Okay. And then the project assessment report, the red line version, the revised PPRP project assessment report would be the clean version, PPRP Exhibit 12, and the red line version, PPRP Exhibit 12A.
No. 12 is already attachment 3. to the supplemental direct testimony of William Cotton.
So if we could just go with PPRP Exhibit 19, then
Okay,
with the revised PPRB Project Assessment Report clean, and PPRP Exhibit 19A, the revised PPRP Project Assessment Report, the red line version.
so marked.
And then the PPRP Exhibit 20, the revised PPRB Project Assessment Report, updated Appendix B, which is the updated glare report, analysis report.
So marked.
And all of these were filed on October 31st, 2024.
Yes. Okay, any objections to PPRP exhibits 13, 13A, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 19A, or 20?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, hearing and seeing none, those PPRP exhibits will be entered into the record.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, did you get the bench exhibits? You need me to read those for you?
Yes, Your Honor, I got them.
Okay. So I understand that Mr. Doniger is going to adopt Mr. Boswell's responses to data requests and testify here this afternoon.
Yes, Your Honor, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Doniger, can you please raise your right hand?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you swear or affirm under penalties of perjury the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Flavin, do you have an attestation for me? No. Okay. Mr. Doniger, are you alone?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you in communication with anyone else at this time?
No.
Okay. The response to bench data request 2-19 indicated that the cost estimate for decommissioning of $372,500 was based on $2024, and you updated the attachment to remove the note. So what did the note initially mean? The note that the cost estimate assumes 2.5% escalation rate on labor costs.
I think we've had several different constructs of doing decommissioning plans, and so the note was not applicable in the way that this one was constructed for this record. Or just it is now clean to just say that these are $2024. Some jurisdictions look for different years which the inflation would apply to, but in this case, these are $2024.
The note now only says based on 10% design package dated 3/2/2024.
Yes, ma'am. So that refers to the engineering package that we've submitted. Obviously, if a CPCN is awarded, moving forward, the project will go through further design phases all the way through up until it gets issued for construction. And so in the subsequent phase, and I think the recommended licensing conditions allow for this, we'll work with the county to finalize all of the exhibits that refer to various different bondings and sureties, this being one of them, to reflect the final design that gets approved for construction.
So the recently filed updated conceptual site plan is still only at 10%?
Yes, ma'am.
In response to bench data request 3-3, you have sponsored the response that states the applicant respectfully suggests that the Public Service Commission include a licensing condition with any CPCN that requires the applicant or current project owner to notify Carroll County and the Public Service Commission if the system fails to generate electricity for a period of 12 consecutive months. Isn't this asking the project owner to notify the commission and the county that it has abandoned the project?
Yes, I think that is the way to read that.
Okay, and does that make sense to you? Would a project owner that's abandoning a project be in a position to notify the county and the commission?
So I think the project owner is the right place for that. Obviously, there might, because as far as the generation of electricity, that the project owner is going to have that visibility. I think PPRP also noted the utility has that visibility as well, whether it's being produced or not. So those would really be the only two entities I think that could really do that. However, I also think that, and again, as PPRP is noted, right, if we're not upholding certain obligations, for instance, just mowing the grass something simple, then others could question that and send an inquiry to the project company and request confirmation whether the project is still operational or not.
But you envision that a project owner would notify the commission and the county that it is abandoning a project.
Yes, I think I'm not sure how else to construct, to structure that notification. I think the project owner has the obligation to continue operations of the project in accordance with the various obligations, whether it's interconnection agreement, et cetera. And if the project is going to stop doing that, for instance, natural disaster overcame the project at any particular given time or something like that, if their decision was made to cease operations, then the project company is the one that needs to notify.
But if a project hasn't been generating electricity for a number of months, shouldn't a responsible project owner notify of an intent to decommission?
Okay, maybe I see what you're trying to say. I agree with that. So the notification milestone, if you will, would be that the project has ceased operations or ceased producing electricity rather than the abandonment concept. I understand. I think I understand what you're saying.
Another response to a bench data request is that the performance of solar panels naturally declines over their lifespan. You then state that as long as the balance of the installed generation equipment, e.g. wiring, combiner boxes, inverters, transformers, etc., remains operational, electricity will continue to be produced and will flow from the project to the grid, barring any interconnection interruptions by the electric utility. Are you familiar with that response?
Yes, ma'am.
So you were stating that electricity will continue to be produced, but what if there's an inverter failure, for example?
So we have, I think 24, if I'm not mistaken, inverters on this project. And so the inverters are the most typical component that will fail. Usually around 12, 15 years into the project, we expect to be replacing the inverters. But because there's 24 of them, only a very small fraction of the energy, if in any one single failure, would stop flowing. And based on our monitoring system, we'd be able to know that and fix it in a relatively short period of time. We typically have spare inverters ready to go, for instance, in that scenario. Did I answer your question?
Yes and no. So you'd be replacing them as they needed to be replaced. So there's not going to come a time when there's a complete failure.
Yeah, as I was kind of thinking about this question and our response leading up to today, to me, there's the question seemed to focus on sort of the normal end of life, but I think the other scenario where the project could become in a point where it might need to be decommissioned would be that natural disaster that I kind of alluded to just a moment earlier. For instance, a tornado hits the project or something like that, and takes out a good amount of the equipment, right? There'd be an economic decision at that point in time to, repair and replace, or to shut down the project to decommission it. So I'm not sure if that's helpful. So that's one piece, and then of course the other is sort of the end of life with the panels that we've focused on in our response, which is kind of a gradual decline in their production as they mature, they age over the life of the project. And again, I think as PPRP stated in their reply to the same question, that it becomes an economic decision at that point, at some point in the future, probably 30 plus years in the future, as to how much electricity is being generated and what the ongoing maintenance costs are at that time, to whether or not to decommission or to come back to the commission for a request to repower. And basically that would be putting on new panels of the new technology and refreshing for a new span of lifetime of the project.
Yes, those are all normal scenarios. I guess the scenario that I'm concerned about that I haven't, I don't think anyone has addressed is a project owner that is perhaps out of state. The inverters maybe have been replaced along the way so that some of them might fail, but there's still some power being generated, but not a lot, but enough that the abandonment criteria is not met and the county and or the state can't declare the project abandoned, and we sit here for a number of years. That's the scenario that I'm trying to get addressed and no one seems to be able to address.
So the scenario is that the project is allowed to get into such a state that it is, let's say, barely producing electricity.
Yes.
That's okay. I mean, obviously,
and in my scenario, there's no financial incentive for the project owner to decommission. They're probably satisfied with allowing the decommissioning bond to be called and let someone else do it. But that other person, being again the county or the state, can't do it because electricity is trickling out of the project.
got it. I mean, I think, I guess it's certainly a conceivable condition, and I'm just not, it's not one that I guess I've really thought a whole lot about. Obviously there is a economic driver here for the project owner. There is debt service that needs to be paid on the project, and other normal operation, normal maintenance requirements that aren't directly tied to the production of electricity, as I mentioned before, like keeping the grass and the landscaping up to codes, which have their own enforcement triggers associated to them, which are independent of the production of electricity. So I think that it would be that the one premise maybe that you mentioned was that there wasn't an economic incentive to decommission, but I think there is a balance there because there will be an economic incentive pushing to make sure that there is a revenue line that is adequate to cover all of those expenses. Um, uh, it isn't it isn't a 100% one way or the other, and so that there. I don't know if that's helpful to your analysis, but that's what comes to mind.
Are you aware that Carroll County amended section 158.153 of its code on December 5th, 2024?
If you tell me the topic, I think the answer is yes, but just to confirm.
The title of that section is Solar Energy Generating Systems.
Because there was one question that we responded to, I think, was about that, but what's your specific
that was a
question?
different section because they just recently amended the Solar Energy Generating Systems.
And I'm not sure if I am or not.
Okay. What I'm going to do is send it around since it doesn't sound as though you are. Okay, I just sent that to all council. You can send it on to your client. Let me know if you didn't receive it. And we're going to mark that as bench exhibit 6.
Your Honor, I haven't received it yet, but it may come here momentarily.
Yes, same thing. I'm still waiting to receive it.
Your Honor, I received an incident on.
Thank you.
I'm still waiting, Your Honor. I think it's just coming through now, Your Honor.
Okay.
And I'm going to forward it right now to Mr. Doniger. Yeah, I just forwarded it, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Doniger, let me know when you've received that.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. I'm opening it up now.
Okay, just I don't, from what you've said so far, it doesn't sound as though you're familiar with it. So if you can just take a minute, review it and confirm that you have not previously reviewed it.
I've not personally reviewed it.
Okay, then I'm not gonna ask you questions about it. This, for everyone's information, according to testimony filed in case number 9736, Carroll County amended section 158.153 solar energy generating systems on December 5th. And what I sent around is what was filed in case number 9736. Is it your understanding, Mr. Doniger, that PPRP license condition 5 contemplates that Chaberton will receive county site plan approval?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you know when the applicant submitted its development plan to Carroll County?
We submitted the ERD to Carroll County. I don't believe we've submitted the development plan to Carroll County, unless that's what you're referring to. But that would come, the site plan and the rest of the permitting activities with Carroll County would come after granting of the CPCN.
Okay, so you haven't submitted anything to Carroll County that you would describe as a development plan?
No, ma'am. Well, let me just amend, which is that we had previously tried to develop this project prior to Carroll County changing their ordinance to not allow solar in this zoning area. And so we have not submitted a development plan since starting the CPCN process, because that was a different project with a smaller size.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Doniger based on my questions? Any redirect?
Your Honor, I don't have any redirect, but I think if possible, Mr. Doniger may want to provide a very minor clarification to some prior discussion regarding the, I think it's the landscaping agreement, and I believe there was the, what was the other one here?
Public Works.
Yeah, the Public Works agreement. If it's okay with you, Your Honor, could Mr. Doniger just provide a brief clarification about those two agreements?
Yes. Do you want to ask him a question?
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Doniger, do you have any clarifications you'd like to make regarding the landscaping agreement and the Public Works agreement with Carroll County as it relates to this project?
And do you want to, in his answer, can he identify where those documents are in the record?
Yes, ma'am, to both. So the clarification I'd like to provide really ended up in the recommended licensing condition number 20, which is titled landscape maintenance agreement. The addition from PPRP refers to landscaping maintenance agreement and public works agreement. I think we introduced a little bit of confusion. The landscaping maintenance agreement is a type of public works agreement. There is also a broader public works agreement that will be required for the project. However, it really mainly is concerned with stormwater maintenance and erosion control activities. And so I just wanted to put that point of clarification. We submitted, I think it was attachment 2-2, Mr. Flavin, if you can correct me if I'm wrong to that. The template landscape maintenance agreement that we obtained from Carroll County. Carroll County also has a different public works agreement, which is more general, and like I said, focuses on the stormwater maintenance. So I think the confusion came in because in the header of the landscape maintenance agreement, it refers to a PWA, Public Works Agreement number, because both of those agreements get filed in the same numbering system is our understanding with the county, and are both administered by the Public Works Department, but there are two different agreements that the project will enter into with the county.
You seem to be indicating that license condition 20 should no longer have the language and public works agreement with Carroll County. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. And that would be my suggestion, is to strike the addition of public works agreement. Like I said, we will have a public works agreement that is separate from landscape, but it doesn't apply to condition 20. That would be a separate agreement, which would be covering stormwater management activities, or improvements is the better terminology.
Ms. McLemore? Do you know if the public works agreement that has to do with stormwater management is otherwise supposed to be filed in the docket pursuant to PPRP's license conditions?
Subject to check. I don't believe it is, but I believe Mr. Seaman can answer that when he gets on the stand if possible.
Okay. So there's at least one modification to the license conditions that need to be made. Mr. Doniger, is that the end of your clarification?
Yes, ma'am. If we want to include it, I would maybe suggest we could just say landscape and stormwater maintenance agreements. And then that would be a very simple change to the RCLs. We have no objection, obviously, to being held to entering into that agreement. That's very standard for solar projects.
Is Mr. Reese available?
Yes, I believe here. Mr. Reese, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Is it possible for you to, is your camera able to be, oh, there it is. Sorry. Thank you.
Mr. Reese, can you raise your right hand?
Yes, I can.
Do you swear or affirm under penalties of perjury the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you alone?
Yes, I am.
Are you in communication with anyone at this time?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Reese, would you please speak up a little bit?
Yes, I'm not in communication with anyone. Can you still hear me pretty well?
Yes. Did the applicant file an updated decommissioning plan at any time?
I believe they did, yes.
When would that have been?
Charles, do you have the exact date when that was updated? I don't think I made the updates to that.
Your Honor, if I may, I think I can provide a little bit of help to that question. An updated decommissioning plan was submitted as an attachment to Chaberton's responses to bench DR2. And I believe it's attachment 2-19.
So the decommissioning plan that is up for approval, you would say is what is attached to BDR as 2-19, not Exhibit 18.
That's correct, Your Honor. This is, yes.
still dated June 21, 2024.
Yes, Your Honor, that version is still dated June 21, 2024, but it was updated more recently than that. So that's a minor clerical error.
But the only change
Yeah, the
is
date,
to remove the erroneous note.
correct. I believe so.
Your Honor, there actually was some additional language adjustments in there regarding the notification to Chaberton regarding if there were any. Let's see, I can pull up the language here. Just give me one moment. I believe it's in section 5.6, responsibility for decommissioning. In response to some questions regarding how that notification would be made. And some of those responses were in bench DR2. Chaberton updated the decommissioning plan to reflect those edits, and also to address some minor errors in terms of references to various entities. So, for example, referring to either Chaberton Solar Pine Rock LLC versus Chaberton Energy Holdings. Those were some additional edits that were made in that decommissioning plan that was filed as attachment 2-19 with bench DR2, with Chaberton's responses to bench DR2.
Okay, one of my concerns is that none of the other parties would have known that there were edits being made that I can tell in a form of a response to a bench data request, since it wasn't separately filed in the docket.
Well, certainly, Your Honor, if you'd like us to separately file that revised.
Well, it's a little late. Ms. McLemore, were you aware that changes were made to the decommissioning plan in the form of a attachment to a response to a bench data request?
Yes, Your Honor, I believe we were.
So if I ask Mr. Seaman, he'll know exactly what was changed. He reviewed it.
I believe that is the case. I know we reviewed the revised I believe it was the revised decommissioning plan that we've been discussing. Yes, Your Honor. But but he can tell you more clearly.
So, Mr. Reese, at the October 23rd hearing, you confirmed that you called the local landfill personally and confirmed that they would receive the materials, and the materials would either be taken to that facility and then taken to a transfer station or recycled, I guess, and recycled, or the materials that could not be recycled would be landfilled. And you indicated that you spoke with someone at Northern Landfill. Sections 5.3.1 through 5.3.8, the narrative of the cost estimate has a slightly different, it's different from what you stated. So 5.3.1 is the PV panels, and it says that they will either be returned to the manufacturer for appropriate recycling disposal or will be transported to a recycling facility. Do you know where the nearest recycling facility is?
That would still be the Northern Landfill. There isn't a specific recycling facility dedicated for PV modules. I think what that language actually probably means is that there may be, depending on when the site is decommissioned, if it's within the first 15 years, there would be actually significant value for the PV modules themselves. There are companies like Ontility, who Arm Group actually works with, who would actually come and decommission the modules and take them. And when I say recycling, they would actually refurbish them and use them to create new modules. So if it's early enough in the lifetime of the system, they probably would not go to a landfill. The owner of the site would contract with a third-party decommissioning company to try and get as much value for the PV modules things that can actually be refurbished, like inverters. So as much of that material would probably be tried to be resold or recycled for refurbishment before it would actually go to a transfer facility.
How early? You
or-
said early enough. How early?
Within 5 to 15 years, you could refurbish modules. Companies would be interested in purchasing them if they're not damaged.
What does the first sentence mean? The project will coordinate the collection and dispensation of the PV modules to minimize the potential for modules to be discarded prematurely.
I think that's saying that, again, the disassembly and the way that the modules are taken apart, I think is critical to not having them be damaged. Again, like contracting with a company like Ontility, that is what they're specialized to do, versus just having a subcontractor come in and demo the site. So if the modules can actually be unstrung and unbolted properly, they would have much more significant value and an opportunity for refurbishment versus, calling a local contractor or somebody who is unfamiliar to solar decommissioning. They would probably come in, just, count everything as scrap and bust everything up and take it off site. So there is an opportunity, at least, within the first 10 or 15 years, if the decom properly, a lot of the equipment can be rather than be disposed of, it can definitely be reused, refurbished, but it needs to be taken apart properly to ensure it is not damaged.
Okay, so in the first 5 to 15 years, there's the possibility for reuse through refurbishment. Then your second sentence, it
Correct.
says, if there is no possibility for reuse, the PV panels will either be returned to the manufacturer for appropriate recycling / disposal. So if there's no possibility for reuse, presumably we've gone past the first 15 years, right?
Yeah, that statement would not be correct in the later term. They would not be able to be returned to the manufacturer. That would only be if they're still palletized or in good condition, or if they were gone to like a third-party reseller. That language is a little confusing, and I do apologize for that. And I could add some clarity under my testimony if that would help.
5.3.2 racking and supports. All steel racks and pile-driven supports will be transported off-site and recycled.
Correct. Yeah, the racking should have significant value for recycling. So almost all
At
the
any
steel will
time?
be at any time, correct.
Okay,
There is no opportunity.
You
Sorry,
said
go
there's
ahead.
no recycling facility. So when you say will be transported off-site and recycled at an approved recycling facility, how would that occur?
That'll go to the northern landfill, and they'll take it to a transfer station, and then they'll take it to approved recycling facility. So
Okay, and the-
everything will have to, everything that can't be sent to like a third party refurbisher would still all go to northern landfill, and then they would determine what is recyclable and what is not, and the material that has value like steel, aluminum, and things like that, they would transfer to a recycling facility.
do they
But yeah,
currently
all
take,
material, recyclable or landfill, would go to northern.
does Northern Landfill currently accept solar panels?
Yes, I believe all landfills required to accept solar panels. Typically, most landfills can't deny waste unless it is like electronic waste or type of waste that is radioactive or has hazardous materials.
But you said you spoke with Northern Landfill and specifically
Correct.
they said they would
Yes,
take
ma'am.
this material.
Correct.
So did you explain to them that you were talking about solar panels?
Yes, I explained that it was specifically for decommissioning of a solar facility.
If they transfer waste from their facility to another facility, how is that paid for?
I don't know. I don't believe the client pays for it. The tipping fees that are incurred when you deposit the material is pretty much the fees for the end user, where they transfer it to them. They're obviously doing that to recoup their costs and profit from recycling of the material. So I don't know how that gets paid for, but it would not be up to the client to pay for the transfer of materials after they've deposit it to the landfill and paid the tipping fees.
So every time the decommissioning plan says that something will be recycled or disposed of at an approved facility, you're still indicating that that would be Northern Landfill, which doesn't recycle there, but would have to take what you're sending them and would transfer it somewhere else to be recycled.
They have a recycling facility. I don't know if it's directly on site, but Northern themselves does have a transfer facility and do the recycling. So it's not like they'd be taking it from Northern land, they just have an approved transfer station. You deposit the material, they will process the material and sort the material, and then anything recyclable, the landfill will typically transfer and recycle. That's kind of how that works. But you would still be taking it to the typical like landfill drop-off center and paying your tipping fee, and you're basically paying your fee for deposit of the material, and then they transfer it, if that makes sense. It's not the client. The client would have nothing to do with the transferring and appropriation of the materials to various facilities. They would drop it to Northern, they would pay the tipping fee for the disposal
And
material.
how do you
and then
know
let-
that things are going to be recycled?
That's up to the landfill. That's not
Well,
something.
it's what the decommissioning plan says throughout.
All material that's warranted to be recycling, like steel and things that are recyclable, landfills typically recycle. That is how they make money. So they want to maintain their maximum airspace. They don't want a landfill material that can be recycled. So almost all the material that has value, the landfills will strip out using processing, magnets, things like that. And then all of the materials like steel and things that have value, they take to transfer stations and try and resell.
But you're not aware of whether Northern or where it might transfer things to has the ability currently to recycle solar panels, correct?
Yes, solar panels are fairly easy to recycle. They're
Are
just
you
made
aware
up
of
of
whether
glass and other
Northern
materials.
Landfill recycles them?
No, I'm not. I know that they took the material and I know that they have recycling and transfer stations, but I'm not open to their operations and do not have the specifics of how they, do that
And you don't know
at their
whether they
facility.
recycle
No.
solar panels, correct?
No, I do not. That is correct. I would assume they would. When I spoke
We
with them,
don't really
like they
want
would have.
assumptions under testimony. We want
Yes, ma'am. Then I would say I do not know whether they would recycle the solar panels or not.
I didn't hear
I
what you
could
said. Could
not
you please
give you a
repeat what you
clear
just said?
answer. I did not have proof of that.
Yeah, you've kind of been breaking up throughout
I am not
your
certain.
He has to repeat what he just said. I didn't
yeah,
get it.
you're breaking up, so you need to repeat the last few things you said. You want me to ask the
I
question
spoke with
again?
Northern Landfill. I confirmed that they would. Yes, I spoke with Northern Landfill. They would accept the material. I am unsure whether they have the means to or would recycle the solar panels. I do know that they have approved transfer stations and do recycle, but am not sure whether or not they would have the ability to recycle the solar panels on site.
Or offsite?
Correct. I do know that there's a lot of approved facilities that would take the panels and would entertain taking them, and there is a significant cost to selling those modules. So I would be willing to go on record and say that if they are not damaged, they would be recycled by someone. There would be significant value wasted to landfill the solar modules. So I would be willing to go on record saying that if Northern does not, they would be transferred or sold to a facility that does, but I cannot confirm whether Northern Landfill has the ability to recycle the solar panels on site.
Where are any of the facilities that you're familiar with that do recycle solar panels located?
All across the Mid-Atlantic, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Ontility has operations in almost every state.
Section 5.3.4, gravel and aggregates, states any used gravel or aggregates will be tested for contamination prior to removal. Where's that in the cost estimate?
Uh, um, I don't know if that's in the cost estimate. I don't necessarily know that that was included. That would be probably, some materials testing in the realm of, $500 or less for grab samples. I mean, if I would figuring that would be the expense of the client. I didn't necessarily know that that would need to be bonded for the materials testing, but if you wanted the decommissioning plan to be updated to include testing of the subbase and aggregate, we'd be happy to include that.
If some used gravel or aggregates are found to be contaminated, where would they be disposed of?
At a landfill.
They just have to be separated from the uncontaminated?
You would have to notify the landfill of the contamination, and then there are approved landfills for hazardous materials based on the type of contamination.
Including Northern Landfill?
Yes, ma'am. All landfills are typically would accept that type of material or obviously it can't necessarily be hazardous waste, but if it was like a fuel spill or something like that, most landfills are approved to accept aggregate or waste spoils that, dirty dirt and things like that. And typically, there's various forms that you actually fill out and have to provide the landfill for the delivery of that material. That would include like your T-clip testing and basically, all of the approvals to show them that it's not hazardous waste. And if it was hazardous waste, then it would just have to go to a landfill that can accept hazardous waste.
Okay, otherwise, you have that all uncontaminated materials will be transported off-site for salvage processing and then reused for construction fill. Where
Yep.
would that be conducted? The salvage processing?
Again, that would be up to the developer. There's a lot of subcontractors they could contract with that would be interested in taking that material. Any type of clean fill has value. So, basically any type of subcontractor in the Maryland region would be interested in, coming and taking that material. I don't think we, contract with someone because that's speculative, assuming there's contamination, which is very unlikely on a solar site.
So section 5.5 of the updated decommissioning plan still states that if the community energy generating facility does not produce energy for a continuous period of 1 year, it will be presumed to have been abandoned. If the facility is abandoned, decommissioning shall begin within 90 days. Have you reviewed the licensing conditions having to do with decommissioning?
Somewhat, yes. Somewhat familiar.
Okay. Your decommissioning plan section 5.5 is inconsistent with the decommissioning licensing condition, which would require or allow for the decommissioning immediately upon abandonment of 1 year. Who do you think is doing the decommissioning in 90 days after something's presumed to have been abandoned?
Whoever they would contract with, some contractor who would provide the service for the decommissioning.
Okay, well then who's presuming that a project has been abandoned?
I think that would be a question for the owner of the project. Again, I just, estimated. I didn't really determine the terms of when the site's going to be decommissioned. For the record, Arm Group didn't prepare as much of the decommissioning plan. We were more responsible for the estimation of the numbers and the values.
Who prepared the narrative?
Chaberton. Arm reviewed it, but the majority of the decommissioning narrative was prepared by Chaberton, which is probably why I have some unfamiliarity in that regard.
It was attached to your testimony, so I was under the impression that you had prepared it.
Yes, ma'am. We did review it and helped preparing it, but the majority of the decommissioning plan itself, it was prepared by Chaberton. Arm Group prepared more of the numbers.
Your Honor, if I may, I can clarify that briefly. The decommissioning plan, it was attached to Mr. Reese's testimony, and Arm, as he mentioned, did review it and did produce the cost estimate. However, the Mr. Boswell's testimony he also indicates that he co-sponsors the decommissioning plan as well. So Chaberton, I think, could respond to questions about the decommissioning plan that Mr. Reese may not be able to answer.
If we go to the cost estimate, the site restoration cost includes 45 cubic yards of regrading. So is that the amount of soil needed for the filling of holes?
It's not needed. That's just the amount of regrading necessary, filling and balancing. We are not estimating that the importation of fill is required at all.
How would the holes be filled?
There are no holes. It's basically just blading, the reappropriation of the topsoil that's already there. So back blading, you're not going to fill.
Can you explain to me what back blading is?
Yes, so basically like where there may be stormwater facilities or berms or areas where aggregate is removed, or if there is, basically tracks by machinery that would be pulling out the piles for the solar racking, all of that will create some earth disturbance to the surface of the site, which will need to be backbladed. Basically have like a skid steer or a loader, which would put its blade down, only an inch or two into the top of the surface, and it would smooth everything out in order for the site to be reseeded and stabilized again. So
Okay.
basically this is kind of cleaning up of the site.
You mentioned pulling out the racking.
Yes, ma'am.
And you've indicated you reviewed this decommissioning plan. I believe in the narrative it talks about how deep things will be driven. What is happening when you pull out the racking? Does that not leave a hole?
Not really. Just so you're aware, the I-beams that are used are actually shaped in a Z, and the actual surface area of the I-beam is extremely small. So if you would calculate all of the I-beams used for the racking, it's less than 4,000 square feet total of an impact to earth disturbance. So there's almost no hole when you actually pull out an I-beam. It kind of implodes on itself, and the plasticity of the soil will kind of backfill itself. We would not be pouring dirt down every hole. We would be removing the racking and then just kind of black baiting the surface.
How about the cable trenching?
Cable trenching, once it's kind of excavated, again, you would kind of backfill. There may be slight voids, but again, we're not going to be importing soil like for trenching. You'd be able to just kind of cover that up, and then, over a year, that soil will go back in place. And the intent is not to put the site back to original topography. I don't think that's the requirement of decommissioning. The intent is to remove everything, smooth out the surface, and then get grass to grow. So again, I do not believe any soil importation would be required to restore the site.
Okay. The posts for the racking are driven approximately 8 feet into the ground using a post driving machine, and it's your testimony that pulling those out will not require any filling of holes.
No, you would not fill an I-beam hole after pulling it back out. If anything, they would address the top surface of the soil and kind of run heavy equipment over it, backblading the soil to smooth out any depressions, and then they would straw and reseed or hydroseed. Those holes will fill themselves back up just from the pressure of, natural ground pressure. And again, if you look at like the cross section of an I-beam itself, a typical I-beam, it's very thin. It is not like 4 by 4 inches. It is not like a fence post. It's shaped like a Z. So the actual surface area of an I-beam is less than a couple square inches. So again, the holes that you would be filling would almost be only an inch wide hole, if that kind of makes sense. And when the process of pulling the I-beam out, a lot of times that hole will then, when you pull the I-beam out, the plasticity of pulling it out will actually close the hole as you pull it out.
So your 45 cubic yards of regrading is based on like the quantity itself.
That's correct. That's the amount of grading. And in a construction estimate, when you put a dollar value to a track loader or a dozer, they put it in cubic yards of how much material needs to be moved. That is not an importation of fill number. That is an estimate of grading in a cubic yard estimation.
So both labor and equipment charges
Correct.
are in that
Yes.
$13,500.
Yep. Yeah, the $300 unit cost would be include man hours and equipment time and fuel. And I will say for the record that in all of our regrading, we were extremely conservative. We had discussions with Chaberton often. A lot of these sites probably really only need 10 cubic yards of regrading, but that number was very conservative. We included all of the trenching, all of the areas of the stormwater management facilities, and then the access drives, equipment pads, all of that.
So based on Mr. Flavin, what you said, I'd like to go back to Mr. Doniger with a question.
Certainly, Your Honor.
Mr. Doniger, you're still under oath.
Yes, Your Honor.
Section 5.6, responsibility for decommissioning. If the facility is deemed to be abandoned by Carroll County and such designation is not disputed by Chaberton Energy Holdings, Inc. or its affiliates within 60 days of official notification in writing, the security shall be in place to defray the cost of decommissioning by Carroll County. What does that mean?
So this is supposed to cover a scenario where for some reason the project does not fulfill its obligation to decommission, and that the bond that we'll put in place for decommissioning, the purpose of that bond is such that the county could execute its authority to pull the dollars from that bond and then decommission if the project company were to fail to do so.
Is your understanding from the language of defray the cost that Carroll County would be able to call the bond first and then perform decommissioning?
Yes, that's right. That's the process for all of the bonding securities that we generally put in place with local jurisdictions, is such that if for some reason we, as the project, do not fulfill our obligation, that those dollars are there and available to the county to execute the activities that are contemplated by that bond, in this case, the decommissioning.
Okay, but it's your position that Carroll County would have to deem the facility abandoned, and then I'm not sure how, because you say the designation is not disputed. How would Chaberton Energy Holdings or its affiliates know to dispute the designation?
Yes, Ron, I think this goes back to the previous question you had asked me earlier too, about the appropriate milestone. And I think the way that I described it earlier, we came to earlier in my testimony, that the project should be under the obligation to notify when the project is no longer producing energy, and that then should start that clock, that 12-month clock for the project to either get fixed, conduct any maintenance that's required, or to commence the decommissioning process. And if that decommissioning process is not commenced, then in that timeline, then the county would have the ability to conduct the decommissioning activities by pulling the bond.
Okay, but isn't this section going to a different scenario, that the county has stepped in and deemed the facility abandoned because
Yes,
of?
ma'am. I think
So
I see the discrepancy here.
and then such designation is not disputed. I'm still trying to understand how Chaberton would know to dispute a designation of abandonment. What are you thinking Carroll County is required to do? to
Well, Carroll
notify
County would
Chaberton?
Carroll County would provide notice to the bonding company of their intent to pull the bond, and the bonding company obviously would then provide notice to the holder of that bond. I think that's
And then under this
normal
section,
structure.
you would have 60 days. It says official notification in writing. So you're still saying that even after abandonment, you have 60 more days to officially notify Carroll County that you dispute their finding the project abandoned?
Yeah, I take your point. I think we can modify this to be more in line with the way the recommended licensing condition sequence, and then if the project fails to commence the decommissioning inside that timeline that's in the licensing condition, then acknowledging that Carroll County has the ability to pull the bond. This is the last make right kind of clause. I think that it would be the end point here, that we shouldn't searching for the right words, but yeah, there's already been a few pieces in place prior to getting to that point. This is the last piece that the county would then has the ability to do it themselves. Obviously, everyone, the county and the project, would prefer the project fulfills its own obligations in its timely manner, and that would be our intent. The purpose of the bond is just the backstop to allow the county that lever. So I think we can make this flow better here.
Mr. Flavin, any redirect based on my questions?
Just very quickly, Your Honor. Mr. Doniger, in the section 5.6 here, and I understand that Chaberton provided a slightly updated decommissioning plan as an attachment to the bench, its responses to bench DR2, which I think tweaks some of that language in section 5.6, and we'd be happy to file it separately and apologize for any confusion along those lines.
It still says that if the facility is deemed to be abandoned by Carroll County and such designation is not disputed by Chaberton Solar Pine Rock LLC within 60 days of official notification, the security shall be in place to defray the cost. So it still has the 60 days of official notification language.
Yes, Your Honor, I understand that. And I guess my question for Mr. Doniger here is that I think the first sentence here says Chaberton Solar Pine Rock LLC is responsible for decommissioning the project at the end of its useful life under normal business operations, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and then there's that additional language. If the facility is deemed to be abandoned by Carroll County.
Mr. Flavin.
Yes.
You can't cross-examine your own witness.
Okay.
No leading questions.
No leading questions on redirect, Your Honor. I apologize. Mr. Doniger.
I do see in the attachment to the BDR response, official notification to Chaberton Solar Pine Rock is defined as any notice, statement, demand, claim, offer, or other written instrument required or permitted to be given pursuant to the decommissioning plan shall be in writing, signed by, and there's some other language. I don't think that clears up my question about the 60 days. So I'm just clarifying, you're requiring Carroll County to provide the Chaberton Solar Pine Rock some sort of notification that it has declared the project abandoned, and then you want 60 more days to dispute that.
Your Honor, I was just trying to offer the clarification that this particular scenario, I think, is envisioning a circumstance where Carroll County, in its belief, assesses that the project has been abandoned, and where Chaberton may not agree with that, or whoever the project owner is may not agree with that assessment that the project is abandoned. So, for example, if there's some type of mechanical issue that takes a while to fix, and the county tries to step in and say, we think this has been abandoned, I think this provision is trying to address that specific situation where Carroll County may feel the project is abandoned when that may not necessarily be the case. And I understand and appreciate your concerns, Your Honor. We're happy to clarify further. But I did want to make that distinction that I think this is some of that language is going to a very specific scenario. It is not intending to address the scenario where Chaberton or whoever the project owner is at the time determines that the project is no longer economically viable and it's time to be decommissioned.
All right. Any other questions?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Seaman, are you still with us?
I am, Your Honor.
How you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thank you. I also have a poor connection. So I'll do my best running video and audio, but
I see you right now. Can you raise your right hand while I can still see you?
I can.
Do you swear or affirm under penalties of perjury the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Are you alone?
I am, Your Honor.
Are you in communication with anyone at this time?
No, Your Honor.
You can put your hand down.
Thank you.
So do you recall the October 23rd hearing?
I do.
You were going to double check the acreage of prime farmland versus all farmland. Do you recall that?
I do.
Did you?
I thought that was in bench DR2. Let me.
It might be. I might have missed it.
I'm sorry. I can't put my finger on where we responded to that. I apologize.
Do you have the information?
Do, but I'm not sure I have it in front of me right now. I'm sorry. Because of the weather, I was not able to get my case file.
But you think it's in your response to DR2. Let me see. I have it.
I thought we provided a response. My best guess is it was in DR2, but I'm scrolling through this very quickly and can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, the only thing I have is a different question. It talks about acreage. But I don't have anything about the farmland in response to DR2.
Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe it's in the revised PAR.
Oh, thank you.
I can look to see what page. It's a little more difficult online, but just bear with me.
It's section 4.2.2, page 21 of the PDF.
Can you give me that section again?
4.2.2.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman, I don't recall, did you review the agreement between Chaberton and the property owner in this case?
No.
I'm
sorry. Let me clarify my answer. Are you asking about a lease agreement for the land?
Yes.
Yeah, no, we did not.
Didn't PPRP in prior cases require that the agreement between the developer and the landowner be provided?
Not on any of the cases I've managed.
Because your response to BDR 2-5, you state, therefore, if Carroll County must hold the property owner responsible for any maintenance or replacement of dead planting, the owner would then be able to hold Chaberton Solar Pine Rock or subsequent owner accountable under their agreement. But you don't know that for a fact because you didn't review the agreement.
So maybe I'm getting hung up on the verbiage. We did not review a lease agreement between the current property owner and the applicant. What 2-5 talks about, or at least we intended to talk about, was the what will eventually be the project owner. We understand that the applicant intends to sell this project and that there will be a different entity other than Chaberton Pine Rock Solar LLC or any version of that will be then the property owner. So that's an important distinction. And I think
Project owner. You just said
Project-
property owner. The
I
property
missed-
owner is not going to change.
I misspoke. I meant project owner. Thank you for that clarification. Right. So
Okay, so are you saying in response to BDR 2-5, when the last part of what I read, their agreement, you mean the agreement between Chaberton Solar Pine Rock and the subsequent owner?
from my understanding, what we'll call the project owner, which will be an entity that purchases a project from Chaberton Solar, would then have to fill out these forms for Carroll County. And that would be the two entities involved in this, if that makes sense. So I'm trying to answer your question.
Well, I guess the original question had to do with the fact that Carroll County's regulations talk about holding the property owner responsible and for dead plantings or any landscape maintenance. And I think what you're saying is that this all will need to just be dealt with the landscaping maintenance agreement between Carroll County and the project owner.
Right. It may be so if Carroll County goes to the property owner, then I believe the lease agreement, I think maybe this is what you're trying to get to, is the lease agreement would then say that the project owner is responsible for that type of maintenance. And that's what we expect, that the project owner, whoever that may be eventually, will be responsible for any landscape maintenance.
But we don't know that because we don't have it in the record, right?
Agreed.
Okay, and you said that PPRP never used to request that agreement. And I take issue with that.
So just for clarification, I can't recall any projects that I've managed. I'm just one of
Were
several.
you
project
on
managers.
the Morgneck Road solar project in Kent County?
I was not, Your Honor.
Okay, that one I know for sure. The copy of the agreement between the landowner and the developer was required to be produced as part of the licensing conditions. Okay, your response to BDR 2-17 states, however, based on PPRP's understanding, during the decommissioning process, all panels and supports and associated equipment would be removed from the site, and any holes left by the panel supports would be filled. Do you recall that answer?
I'm looking at it right now. Yes.
Okay. And then you were here for Mr. Reese's testimony?
I was. I did miss a little bit of it here and there, but I think I got the overall, message, if that makes sense.
So your testimony or your response to this bench data request and his testimony are somewhat at odds. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's just the way we're characterizing the situation. If I heard him correctly, Mr. Reese is explaining how the support posts actually do not create much of a void space once removed, and that there's no official filling of that void space other than what he described as like backblading and things like that, and that is what I would consider like industry standard. Does that help clarify?
You testified that PPRP reviewed the cost estimate and finds it to be reasonable and consistent with recent decommissioning plans and cost estimates that the commission has approved for other solar projects. Did you review the narrative of the decommissioning plan itself, or did you just review the cost estimate?
That was done under my direction. I don't want to speak for someone else's work, but I do believe that the narrative was reviewed as well. It was more than just the numbers, and I could ask that to my team and get back to you, but I'm pretty sure about that. I just don't want to speak for someone else's work.
Well, I'm just trying to understand how far your testimony goes, because it's clear you reviewed the cost estimate and found it reasonable. But you go on to say that it's consistent with recent decommissioning plans and cost estimates. And so I'm not sure. I wanted to know whether your testimony could be taken to mean that you reviewed the entire decommissioning plan.
Yes, my one of our consultants who reviews those decommissioning plans, she reviewed it in its entirety and came to the conclusion that the costs proposed would cover decommissioning. And of course, that's within the first 5-year block.
But did that person review the narrative section of the decommissioning plan itself?
I would have to get back to you. I'm sorry. I just don't want to speak for someone else's work.
Okay.
I believe the answer is yes. I'm just trying to take an honest approach, but I believe the answer is yes, but I'll get back to you.
In response to BDR 2-21, based on PPRP's understanding, Carroll County would require a demolition permit for the decommissioning of the solar array, and the Carroll County Soil Conservation District would require a sediment control permit for any disturbance of greater than 5,000 square feet. You familiar with that response?
I am.
This project is greater than 5,000 square feet, correct?
Yeah, it's actually the disturbance of the soil is greater than 5,000.
And is that the case in this project?
I think again, he was breaking up a bit, but I think Andrew Reese, if I heard him correctly, had to quantify that number and said it was 4,000 square feet, which would be under that threshold. But I'm not sure I fully understood if that incorporated all of the disturbance or if it was just the posts. Because of course there's like inverters, inverter pads, other type of improvements. So I didn't quantify that number. And I'm not sure exactly how Mr. Reese got to his number, but my understanding is the threshold is 5,000 for the county.
Okay, but they would at a minimum require a demolition permit.
That's my understanding, yes.
And neither permit is discussed in the proposed decommissioning plan, correct?
Not that I recall.
So response to bench data request 2-26. You state, regardless of what the applicant's decommissioning plan says, PPRP's recommended license condition number 26 does not include a mechanism in which Carroll County can deem the project abandoned. If the PSC incorporates this license condition as written, the project would be considered abandoned if there is no electric generation to the grid for a period of 12 consecutive months. So I don't understand. How does the last sentence not provide a mechanism by which Carroll County can deem the project abandoned?
So because this is PPRP's condition, we've defined abandonment as no not importing power to the grid for a total of 12 consecutive months. That's not a county requirement. So I'm just making the distinction there that there's no Carroll County requirement embedded in our condition. It's a PPRP requirement, understanding that we differ from the county. My understanding is the county deems the project abandoned after 6 months of non-operation. We go a little farther with our definition to incorporate what non-operation means, meaning exporting power to the grid. So simply put, my answer to that is that again, there's no mechanism for the county embedded in our condition. The county has its own mechanism in their county code, but it's not.
Can you point me to that?
I think I can. I don't have the reference. I do have a summary of it. I can get you the code, the number of the code. But
it's not section 158.153.
I don't know. I'm sorry. So I have here, code requires that quote, decommissioned site shall be restored to its original pre-development condition within 12 months of the proposed date of discontinued operation or abandonment. And then it goes on to say if a facility doesn't operate for 6 months, the code requires the operator to inform the county. So in my bench DR responses, I'm trying to make the distinction between what the county says and what PPRP has in their condition, which does not line up exactly.
Have you reviewed what I sent around this morning or this afternoon? The newly enacted section 158.153.
I received it, but I haven't reviewed it entirely.
You haven't reviewed it before today?
I have. Sorry. I thought you were sharing that because of the new setback requirement. I'm not sure where you're going with this, but I do have it in front of me, and yes, I've reviewed it, but it's been a while. I have that pulled up if that helps.
Yes, I have
Yep.
several questions about it.
Okay.
So as I asked Mr. Doniger, PPRP license condition 5 contemplates county site plan approval, correct?
I'll get to my conditions. Yes, our latest version of the conditions, number 5 is final site plan submittal.
States no less than 45 days prior to the start of construction, project owner shall file a final site plan as approved by the local jurisdiction in the docket, correct?
Yes.
So your license condition, as you've proposed, requires final site plan approval from Carroll County.
It does, as written right now, yes.
And in your review prior to today of the newly enacted section 158.153, are there sections of that newly enacted code that will make final site plan approval more difficult, in your opinion?
So I think the obvious situation here is whether or not the new setback requirements would require a change in the design, and whether or not this project's even viable at that point. And I think that's a question for the applicant. So I think I understand where you're going with this. I'm gonna say that in order to mitigate the change in the code and align condition number 5, we would have to make a change to condition number 5. And we've done that on some other cases that were not filed before this, meaning proactively. We would have to retroactively change this to change the language to address the applicant not being able to meet, for example, the 400-foot setback requirement. But I can't make that determination until someone like the applicant says we cannot comply. So it's a little bit, and maybe I'm just not seeing this right, but it's a little bit like putting the cart in front of the horse.
Similarly, the buffer requirement in section F(i) would be, I don't believe Chaberton's proposed buffer would conform to that. Do you know?
Let me get to it. Buffer. I think we're talking about the same thing. Yes. So the county has made some changes that are not incorporated in the applicant's site plan. And when those are incorporated in the site plan, I'm not sure that the applicant even has a viable project. And that's kind of where I'm going with this is
Right. There are two separate sections. There's setback.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there's buffer.
Right.
The setback has to do with distances. The buffer section is talking more about heights and types of plantings, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's PPRP's position that No change. It's not recommending any changes to the licensing conditions at this time.
So if the Public Service Commission were to decide to, and maybe I'm not getting this language right, I'm doing my best, if you were to decide to preempt that new county ordinance and not require that increase in setbacks and buffers, then we would have to revise condition number 5 in order to account for that. Because as you're pointing out, it would no longer, Chaberton would no longer be able to get approval from the local jurisdiction for its final site plan.
But I think you said it backwards.
Yeah,
I don't know.
okay.
I don't know what the commission's going to do,
Right, yep,
but the conditions as written, if they turn out to not be conditions under which the project developer can still develop the project, I'm thinking that the developer would, at a minimum, need to come back to the commission.
right. And that's what I meant earlier before about putting the cart before the horse. We've talked about this internally, but we don't know what the applicant's going to do to try to comply with this or to ask the commission to preempt this requirement. So we didn't want to change a condition, prematurely. That's not our decision to make. Is we don't believe that's our decision to make, if you know what I'm saying. We will react if that's the direction it goes and the applicant asks you to preempt that condition, then obviously we would have to change condition number 5 to reflect that.
In the interim, we have the possibility that a proposed order and then a final order gets issued, which is incoherent, I guess. There's a need to come back to the commission, which is not an ideal situation.
Understood.
Because in another code section that appears to be changed is that decommissioning plan would need to be submitted for review and approval by the zoning administrator as part of the site plan approval process. And I think that's inconsistent with PPRP's recommended license conditions as well.
Yeah, I agree that because the county changed some of their code language, that it doesn't fit nicely into our conditions. Again, we didn't we didn't, I think it's the applicant's decision of how they're going to move forward. What I'm trying to say is I think the applicant should revise documents, whether that's a site plan and or text associated with it, explain how they're going to address these, and then we would change our conditions to try to get the same protections with the new project as proposed, if that makes sense.
Do you have the license conditions in front of you?
I do.
Your proposed condition, I think it's 25, the glare analysis and potential mitigation condition.
Yes.
If project owner selects a final panel type, panel design, tracking technology, or layout other than that incorporated into the CPCN, is that extremely likely?
Yeah. So I think what you're asking me is, we find that often, if not always, the panel type is not what was proposed during the application process because the technology moves so quickly. So this is a condition that I helped develop years ago to incorporate that. What we learned on another project was even changing the texture of the glass of the panel, changed the glare analysis. So essentially what we asked for is we asked for essentially like as-built drawings, like what they actually the panel type they actually used. to give us another chance to look at the glare analysis to make sure that the new panels or the new configuration or whatever may have changed between the final order and the final site plan that's approved by the county is then reanalyzed for glare.
Okay, and then in C, if the results of the glare analysis identify that the final panel type, array design, tracking technology, or layout has changed the project's glare profile. What does that mean?
So it says or layout has materially changed the project glare profile. I think what we're trying to capture there is if the glare then becomes a safety concern on hypothetically like a nearby airport, then we would have to reevaluate that project. Obviously, we do not want to build projects that have glare that we believe may have an impact on something when it comes to safety.
Who's making that determination under C?
We would review the change, and if there is glare that we believe needs to be mitigated, then we would propose to the commission at that time some mitigation. Whether that's a vegetative screen or some other mechanism, or changing the glass type, or a lot of times single axis trackers produce glare. I'm sorry, fixed tilt produces glare, but if you go to single axis tracker, you can get rid of it and things like that. So they may have to change the project in order to mitigate the unacceptable glare.
But glare profile, those two words does not mean the number of hours of glare on any receptor.
I think they do.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get a handle on what you mean by
Yeah.
glare profile, and you went straight to unreasonable glare on an airport, and I think it means something before you get there.
I think we're just trying to come up with clever words to describe the result of the glare analysis.
Okay, but in any event, it would be PPRP that would look at the results of the glare analysis and decide that the project's glare profile has changed.
That's right. Yeah, essentially, we want, for safety reasons, and we think it's justified. We want a final bite at the apple if anything materially changes, to ensure that glare does not have impacts that we were not aware of on surrounding properties, airports, roadways, things like that. It's kind of understanding that these projects, just the way this process goes and the technology changes, that in good faith, the applicants propose a certain panel type, but in actuality, when these projects are built, sometimes 3, 5, even more years later, those panels aren't even available. So again, it's really important from a safety perspective to rerun that glare analysis to ensure that the actual equipment they're putting on the site does not create an issue.
Okay, in any event, because this is extremely likely to happen, the commission should expect an additional filing by both the project owner and PPRP in response to that, correct?
Yes.
Even if PPRP's filing indicates there's no issue, there will be a filing so that the project owner can proceed.
Correct. That's what we envision, yes.
Your license condition 3.
Are you there?
Yeah, it's
Oh, okay.
CPCN expiration. No, I'm sorry. PPRP used to have a CPCN expiration condition. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
And it no longer has one,
No, on the one we filed, I have it as number 2, right above.
but it's changed, right?
Yes, and I think what you're referring to is years ago, we used to have 3 years in there. We've upped that to 5. And maybe I'll bore the commission with this, but the 3 years came from air permitting. Back in the day, the EPA had a requirement for permitting where if you didn't build a facility after 3 years, you had to come back in for your air permits. We adopted that early on, but what we've learned through this process is that sometimes 3 years is essentially not long enough. So we have increased that from 3 to 5, and I don't know exactly which case started that trend, or if you want to call it that, or that made that jump from 3 to 5, but I don't think this is the first one.
Okay,
I
but
think it's wild turkey, but sorry, go ahead.
Again, going back to, I know you said you weren't on Morgan Neck Road Solar in Kent County, but that one had an expiration of the CPCN in 30 years from the date of the beginning of commercial operations, or 34 years from the date of the CPCN issuance. Did you work on any projects where there was a CPCN expiration intended to deal with the expiration of the permit to operate after end of useful life?
Not that I can recall.
Another condition that seems to not be in these proposed conditions has to do with site control. I know another case I know that you weren't involved in was 9716, but it is a Chaberton case. There was a site control proposed condition. And if you don't know, or you're not familiar with any cases in which there was a site control condition, tell me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's not ringing a bell.
Okay. Access condition, did you work on any projects where the proposed license conditions had an access condition?
Like for government agencies to access the site for like inspections and things like that, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes, I do recall that. Um, we did try to streamline these conditions. Some things came out because we didn't think we needed to kind of state the authority that we already had, and I think that access condition may have been dropped for that reason.
Where do you think the access is otherwise authorized?
For the state, we have the ability to access properties that they permitted, and we already have that authority, but I don't want to speak for the attorneys. I know that was done under legal counsel.
Did you work on any projects that had a soil compaction management condition?
I did.
Would you agree that there's not one of those in this case recommended?
No, I actually am the one who changed this. So to keep it consistent under 11 vegetative management, you'll see that under subpart A, it references 2011 Maryland standards and specifications for soil erosion and sediment control. That compaction requirement's embedded into that document.
Is there anything in your recommended conditions about pollinator habitat?
I don't think on this one.
Did you review the Carroll County Code with respect to native grasses or pollinator friendly habitat?
Yes, we did as part of our review. Yes.
Because I believe the Carroll County Code says it has to be replaced with native grasses or pollinator-friendly habitat,
Right.
but I don't know that the conditions would require that. Would that come through the site development process then?
It would. Yes, it would. The state's program for pollinator habitat is voluntary. So, we cannot, we cannot force an applicant, to plant pollinator habitat. I will point out that condition 11, the same one I referenced, subpart A, subpart B talks about native or naturalized species to reestablish the site, the grasses.
Right.
So we're trying to we're picking up on the native part. I'm just trying to
But
make
not the
distinction.
pollinator.
Right. I'm just trying to make the distinction that we're still picking up on the native portion of this, but not the pollinator because that's voluntary.
Okay. And then the difference in, I guess, Carroll County Code, it can't exceed 36 inches, but you don't have that exactly. You have a limit on not less than 10,
That's correct.
but you don't have anything on the maximum.
Right.
And again, it'd be your position that would be picked up by Carroll County.
Correct. And it goes after two different things. The 10 inches is for to provide habitat for ground nesting birds, whereas I believe the 36 max is like a nuisance thing, like, for the county, like you must cut your grass, keep it maintained. Ours, on the other hand, is what I would call an ecological benefit.
Your land use condition,
What number is that?
let's
Yeah,
see.
I'm looking to Oh, 15 land use.
Yes. So prior to the start of construction, Chaberton Solar Pine Rock shall certify to the PSC by filing a statement in the docket that it has designed the facility in substantial conformity to Carroll County site plan requirements as appropriate, as described in section 155050 of Carroll County Code of Ordinances. Chaberton Solar Pine Rock shall also obtain site plan approval from Carroll County as appropriate and certify to the PSC that it has obtained such approval by filing a statement in the docket. I guess I don't understand the purpose of the first sentence if Chaberton Solar Pine Rock is required to comply with the second sentence.
I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm sorry.
Why would Chaberton Solar Pine Rock need to certify that they designed the facility in conformity to site plan requirements if they're required to obtain site plan approval and certify to the PSC that they obtain such approval?
Yeah, I think what you're pointing out is those two sentences basically say the same thing. Yeah, in light of that, I think we need to re-examine that condition and clean it up.
Would you agree that the applicant's decommissioning plan has no provision regarding the disposal of hazardous wastes?
I'd have to confer with my expert on that, just to make sure, but I don't think it does, no. From what I recall, it never anticipated the generation of hazardous waste. therefore it never discussed the disposal of hazardous waste.
In the decommissioning license condition proposed in A, almost to the end of A, it states, unless project owner has filed a request for repowering in the docket. Does it still say that?
So is this my condition?
Yeah, hang on a minute.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm
no, it's okay. I'm getting there too.
yeah, so 26A.
Yep.
Last sentence.
Okay, so last sentence. Correct. I'm sorry. Can you ask that question again?
The first part of that sentence is unless Chaberton Solar Pine Rock has filed a request for repowering with the PSC.
Mhm.
Then it goes on to say the project will be considered abandoned. So the first part of my question is it PPRP's position that approval from the commission is required for the repowering?
Yeah, so what this touches on is we believe that by and large, and maybe not holistically for every project, but by and large, a lot of these projects at the end of their expected useful life, let's just call it 30 years, instead of decommissioning, we'll probably repower the site because the panel technology will be better, and they already have that interconnection. And this is supposed to account for that. So if they choose to, instead of walk away from the project at the end of the useful life, and then it would be considered abandoned in 12 months, if they instead want to what we call repower the site, that would require the Public Service Commission's approval, we believe. That's why we put that in here.
Okay, that's what I wanted to confirm.
Yep.
You were here for my discussion with Mr. Doniger about my concern about a project owner that perhaps is no longer actively involved in the project, has recouped as much as it was going to recoup, and is just no longer isn't interested in repowering, but because there are a couple inverters that were replaced at some point and are still working, power is still being produced. Does PPRP have a way of dealing with this situation?
I think because we define abandonment as no power going to grid for 12 consecutive months, I think, until that happens, that none of our conditions would kick in. So
it could be potentially a drawn out process.
Yeah, I mean, drawn out for maximum 12 months, I guess. Yeah.
No, I'm asking about how long it would take for the electric generation of the grid to go to zero.
I'm not sure I'm following you, but so
okay. The project will be considered abandoned if there is no electric generation to the grid as measured by the electric company. Oh, hang on a second. Yeah, the project will be considered abandoned if there's no electric generation to the grid for a period of 12 consecutive months. No electric generation means zero, right?
Right. So understanding these projects are remotely operated. I mean, other than some maintenance like cutting grass and washing the panels and typical maintenance, things like that. It doesn't necessarily mean someone has to be on the site for it to be operational, right? So as
Right.
long as the project is importing power to the grid, we consider that an active project. If they stop importing power to the grid for 12 consecutive months, that's when we consider it abandoned. That's our definitions.
Okay, is PPRP concerned at all about the scenario in which a project owner is no longer interested in the project and is not going to repower? However, there is some amount of electric generation grid, maybe not economically beneficial, but some is coming out for some number of years, during which time we can't declare the project abandoned because some amount of electric generation is coming to the grid, but yet the project owner is not doing anything that they were required to do.
Right. So I never really contemplated that before in maybe the grander sense, but we do have provisions in place for complaint resolution and things like that. Like, for example, Do they stop cutting the grass? Do they allow the vegetative screen to die? Things like that. So we've tried to capture that in a maintenance and complaint resolution process.
Right, but PPRP hasn't come up with a way to determine that there's a point in time at which there's such a small amount of electric being generated that really the project should be declared abandoned.
No, yeah, we haven't contemplated to the point where we've changed our conditions to account for that. Yeah, that's I think that's fair to say. I hope that answers your question.
Just checking my notes to see if there's anything else I need to ask you.
Yeah, sure. Take your time. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McLemore, do you have any redirect based on my questions?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. McLemore, I did want to ask you, though, about the access condition. Since I think Mr. Seaman was seeming to indicate that it's really more of a question for you.
Yes, Your Honor. In some cases, it is included in RLCs. It wasn't in this one.
Is there a reason? He thinks it's covered somewhere else, but I don't see where the county, for example, would have the ability to access this property.
I am not aware of where else it would be covered, Your Honor. Your Honor, do you mean the county or do you mean PPRP? I apologize.
Well, Mr. Seaman believes that PPRP or the different state agencies would have the ability to access through the permits that they're granting. So that allayed my concerns with respect to PPRP somewhat. I know the condition always allowed access for everyone, but I don't see where the commission would have access, commission staff. I don't see where the county would have access.
The county may have access under their ordinance, Your Honor. I would not know, but I would imagine they would. However, you are correct. PPRP would not have access. Some of the reviewing state agencies, example, Maryland Department of the Environment, may have some under their own regulations for certain specific requirements, but not for the entire access. No, Your Honor. So as for the state agencies, no, I do not believe that PPRP or the commission would have access otherwise.
So perhaps the condition should be back in.
Yes, Your Honor, that might be the case.
Okay, that's all the questions I had for the witnesses today. Is there anything else that we need to address this afternoon?
Your Honor, just a quick question. I think maybe based on some of the questions that came up, at least in the questioning of Mr. Doniger and Mr. Reese, at this point, would Your Honor like, or would you be willing to entertain Chaberton filing, for example, an updated decommissioning plan to try to address some of these questions, or additionally trying to make an additional filing to address how the county's newly enacted legislation may affect the design of the project, and whether that's feasible, and or I'm not sure how Your Honor would like to proceed with that.
I intend to issue a proposed order on what's been put in front of me thus far. Chaberton is not able to address the changes to the Carroll County Code, I don't believe, at the time of this evidentiary proceeding. We already held the record open once and had a second hearing. I think it's time to issue an order, and then you can go from there.
Okay, understood. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Anyone have anything else? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care. We
Thank
can go off
you.
the record, Doug.